This is what I'm talking about. This is why I can't stand some of these big companies that deal with some of our favorite pieces of media. Video game companies, freaking EA and all their nonsense. Disney drives me bonkers, and this is why some of these companies just drive me up the wall. Disney already owns like half of Hollywood. And so Marvel is owned by Disney, okay? And Marvel was bankrupt, and they were saved, right, from a couple strategically, crucial moves, and now they're booming. Sony came to an agreement with Marvel and said, hey, we'll let you use Spider-Man in your films and things like that, and you get 5%. Let me just double check here. Yeah, you get 5% of the revenue. Not just profit, but like all of gross revenue, which is a pretty good deal. Now, I don't know if Disney expected Spider-Man to take off quite as well as it has, but Spider-Man's done well. And Far From Home made $1.1 billion. And so, of course, it's not enough. The fact that Disney makes billions of dollars is not enough. So Marvel goes back to the table and says, hey, you know how you wanted 5%? Actually, we want 50%. Instead of the 5% that you were giving us, we want 50%. We want to make it even partners with the Spider-Man brand. Now, I don't know about you, but if you have a loan out and the loan percentage is 3%, and then all of a sudden they come to you and say, hey, look, you're paying us 3% interest. We actually want 50% interest. Are you going to freak out? Yeah, I probably would, right? And so I don't know why it's a surprise to people. This just makes me angry. It's not a surprise to me. It just makes me frustrated. I don't know why some people are surprised by this, but Sony gave them the middle finger. They went, boo, no thanks. We're just going to take the Spider-Man brand back. Well, there's a bunch of fans that were really kind of hoping to see another Spider-Man movie. Plus, Foggy has really pushed this idea of the Dark Avengers, I think I said that right, like the evil Dark Avengers. I think it's the same thing. I'm not a big Marvel comic book, reader. I read DC comics, but from what I understand, Dark Avengers is something that they want to push. They can't really do that without Spider-Man. Plus, they're making Marvel Land, right? So they're making Marvel Land, and it's being built right now, and if they lose this deal with Sony, that's going to take a big hit on not just the money that they can produce, but also just how that park is laid out, the rides and the exhibits that they want to put in there. So it's a stupid decision, but also a smart business decision if you're a greedy company. So if you're a greedy company, yeah, I would expect you to come back saying, hey, this is doing really well. We don't want 5%, we want 50%. If you are a greedy, stupid company, you would set up this entire chain of events to where if one little block falls off, your whole Jenga set falls apart, and then become greedy and say, hey, we want 50%, and risk that little block. If I were Disney, I would have said, okay, we have all these different ducks in a row. If we lose this contract with Sony by asking too much, we could end up jeopardizing a lot of other things. Merchandise being sold, Marvel Land, all of these different things. Can't make any more movies. So instead of going 50, why don't we start with, hey, 5% is rather low now that we're looking at the numbers. And we're doing a lot of upfront work, and we're doing all the production. We are doing all of the upfront costs. You're helping 50% with that, and so we feel like maybe 20% would be a little bit more fair. They might counter with 10, and you meet in the middle and do 17.5. Seems reasonable to me. But instead, Disney thought, let's just go for a home run. Let's go at 50%, and let's see if they say, no, we're gonna give you 20 or 25 or 30, because 17.5 wouldn't be good enough. You needed 25, even though you're making billions of dollars everywhere else. And so now we might not get anything. But at the same time, I don't really think we have really anything to worry about long term. If you look at the breakdown, Sony holds a lot of the cards. And the reason why I say that is because if you look at some of the other movies that Sony has produced in the past with Spider-Man, right? The original trilogy that they came out with Tobey Maguire. If you adjust for inflation, which I know Hollywood doesn't, but if you do, they easily made $1 billion. And the video game's been super popular. They sell their own merchandise. And so that brand can still do really well for that company as long as they get the right director in there. They can keep Tom Holland. Tom Holland, I think, has 2 more movies that he has to make with Sony anyways, whether it's with Marvel or just with Sony. And I think they'll be okay as long as they make a good film. And so Sony really holds the cards because all they need to do is produce something that's good quality. Marvel and Disney really holds less cards than you would think because there's a lot more on the line. They've created a very successful brand that's intertwined with Marvel Studios, that's intertwined with the Avengers. And so if they lose that deal, a lot of what they've built is going to be ruined. They've created this Marvel land, and that will take a hit. Merchandise will take a hit. Fan base will take a hit. And so there's a lot more riding on the line for Marvel than there really is for Sony. And so when you're looking at that, apples to apples, it's really more of like an apple to orange. Sony really does hold more of the cards, and so they have more pull with this negotiation. You know, it is in a better interest to make a deal for Sony. It's not in the best interest for that company to not make a deal because really Sony only has one big brand left, which is Spider-Man. So they lost Bond. And who else is by Sony? Is it Jumanji, I think? So Jumanji isn't really tried and true yet. And so Spider-Man is really all they got left. But they can't afford to give 50% of the revenue from that brand. I mean, it's the only thing that they have that keeps them really making money. And so you can't give away 50% of it. So but it is in their better interest to keep it because they have that fan base from the Marvel Studios. And so making a deal somewhere in between, right around that 17.5%, I think would be a good deal for both of them. Disney makes a little bit more. They are doing a lot of work, and they are bringing a lot of fans to the films. And so there's value there. But it's not fucking 50% of the revenue. And Sony doesn't go under because they're trying to be too nice. So Sony is playing a little hardball, which I congratulate them for because not enough people play hardball with Disney. Disney kind of walks all over Hollywood, and it drives me bonkers. I used to be a big Disney fan, and then as from one business owner to another, when you own a small business, you know, I own a few locations, and in comparison to a giant corporation like that, integrity, quality of care, taking care of customers, putting the customer first, having good communication with your staff, treating your staff over and beyond what they typically would expect. Those are all things that I hold near and dear and I take very seriously. When you're a big company like that, it's all this. It's money, 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 money. And so the older I got and the more into business I started to respect Disney a lot less. And so I give Sony props for going to bat. And I think that their bat could turn into a couple singles. I think this could work out in their favor for the most part. It sucks, you know, that they might end up having to give away more than they probably planned. But they have more pull to really negotiate something that's a smaller percentage. And I think that they are going to come to an agreement because it's in a better interest for both parties to have the deal than to not have the deal. So I don't really think we have too many things to worry about as far as are we going to see Spider-Man and Marvel again? I think we will. It's just frustrating that we have to deal with just the nuances of this and potentially not see another Spider-Man film from Marvel. But that's big business. That's taking a couple cracks at the other team, trying to see what you can scruff up, but it's just frustrating. I would love to see big corporations like Sony, Marvel, Disney, Universal Studios, when they do these kind of things, I would just love for one time to not be about the bottom line. I would just love for one time to be about creating a quality product that will make money if you make a quality product, but instead you just think about the money and how, like, who has more percentage versus who's doing more work and how much can we scrape across from the other party. I just would love to see quality of film come back into Hollywood and just focusing on making good quality films, putting the customers, we're the customers, we buy these things, so they make no money if we don't go to the theaters or if we don't buy their Spider-Man masks, right? And so we give them the ability to do that, and they still don't give a shit, and it just boggles my brain. And so I'm a big moviegoer, I see a lot of movies, but the more these stories come out, the more frustrated that I get that I'm the one that is paying for them to argue over who's gonna make more of my money. And it drives me nuts. I want them to say, look, we wanna come out with a really good film. We're arguing on the best way to go about that. I would much prefer to see that be a problem, and that's why they can't come to a deal, versus you're giving us $20, we want to make 50% of that versus, $2 or $5 or $7, $9, whatever the percentage they end up agreeing on. And so that is frustrating to me. I would much rather them say, look, we can't agree on who's producing this, or we can't agree on how much control Sony has over the decisions we make. And we want to come out with a good film for you, but we're not agreeing on the best way to go about that. I would prefer that to be the problem. So those are my thoughts on the Marvel, Disney, Sony fiasco that's going on right now. If you don't like it, that's okay. Those are just my opinions. If you do like it, leave a like, comment, subscribe, share this video, and you can check other videos out right now.